Live streaming is on.
Good evening and welcome, doomers and non-doomers alike. OMG, 132. Yeah, I've got 132. What was OMG about? It's disrupted my tidy, beautiful introduction. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, doomers and non-doomers alike. Label yourselves as you will. Today is January 15th in the year 2023, and this is meeting number 132 of the Extinctionati, waiting together and separately for the end of things, or at least to get some idea of when the end of things might be, what the end of things might look like, whether it's going to happen, and so on and so forth. I think we've all established it. It's happening. Today's meeting, we would like to maybe talk about some of the something sort of, getting closer towards the topic, I suppose, of the internal processes that might be involved with recognizing the predicament of mankind, and where we sort of acknowledge that we don't really have much agency, if any, in the outcome of the scenario that we're in. We do have agency as relates to our ability to cope with that, maybe in terms of just the internally important processes, like how do we manage our own feelings and our ability to continue to live under circumstances where society and civilization and the ecosystem are deteriorating. So how do we do that between us and ourselves? And how do we possibly create some sort of connection with other people that can maybe mitigate some of the circumstances? So again, there's a tendency we have to think catastrophically about things, but we don't know what kind of situations are going to come up in the future, and maybe our internal resources, our mental state of mind, maybe our spiritual position will help us to make a positive contribution as things unfold. Does that say something useful? I don't know. We have a podcast, or there's a YouTube video in which a chap called Bernardo Kastrup talks about various topics. He's somebody that I'm somewhat aware of, but because this particular one was posted on the sub, I listened to the whole thing and I found certain elements very interesting and sort of illuminating, can I say? And I thought, oh, this guy's cool. He's switched on. He knows what he's talking about. And then there were other things that he said that made me think, oh, human beings are just useless wallies, and he's one of them. I experience everything with this sort of level of ambivalence. I don't know how other people feel, but also I don't know if anybody who's present here has anything to say about that topic in itself, or would I summarize it potentially, and maybe, or I could just riff on my impression of some of these various points that I got from the conversation. As I say, I don't know enough about Kastrup himself to be able to talk about anything beyond that one particular podcast. Does anybody have any take, or am I just going to be left to waffle on? Okay, okay, I'm going to try then and sort of say something about the things this chap was saying that registered with me. Again, as I say, I'm not really one to take notes and do a sort of homework thing. So Ellie, you didn't do your homework and I didn't do mine. I don't know if anybody did, but basically this guy was talking about okay, I don't know. He was talking about lots of things. So in terms of like what struck me is that he was talking about this idea of a daemon, which came up, or has come up for me in other contexts, where he's trying to follow a sort of impulse that he has to doing things, which is I don't know what he was describing. Like there's some part of his sort of inner self No, it's not some part of his inner self. He's talking about basically that then there's maybe a voice or an impulse leading him to do things that he sees as not being really him. So there's, well, from what I understood, he's saying that basically that nature in some way is motivating him to do certain things, and he wants to. Audio was talk about Bernard. Yeah, do you know what? It's quite difficult. I'm going to try not to look at the screen share if I can find a way to do it, because then I'm sort of following with my eyes what's going on. Yeah, that's now I'm distracted. So anyway, so we were talking about him now. See, that's difficult. But GS, do you mind not sharing the chat from YouTube onto this thing, because I can't help myself from looking at it, and I'm finding it kind of distracting, and I don't know how to. Is there any way I can make myself not see the screen? Okay, that's cool. Thanks. I've just lost my thread, and I've got no idea what I'm talking about anyway. So trying to riff without having any idea what I'm talking about is not very helpful, because I don't really have very much to say. But that doesn't. I'm not the only one today. Right. Anyway, so where were we? So this chap Kastrup is talking about the fact that he perceives something that he called a daemon, that is maybe the some sort of force of nature that's informing him of things to do. And at least part of what he was talking about in this podcast or YouTube video is that he's going to, or he wants to follow this force of nature. So when he's written his books, and again, I haven't read his books, and I don't know what his shtick is in general, but he's saying that he's learned how to sort of follow this impulse, and it's something that comes from outside of him, which again might be considered a mental illness, I guess, in some circles. But to me, it sounded like a very interesting idea. And he talked about how this impulse coming from nature is getting him to do things that he considers are the right thing to do, or he considers that it's correct or virtuous to follow these impulses. And oh, good, I'm glad you're here now. I hope you can help me out here a little bit, trying to relay some of the impressions from this Bernardo Kastrup thing. And similarly, DB, if you want to even textually bring something up, or Ellie, if you pick up on anything and just want to riff on whatever bullshit I'm saying, then please feel free to jump in, because as I say, I'm just riffing. I've got no idea what I'm talking about. Anyway, so there was this entity, or this chap is saying that basically he gets impulses to do things from nature. So for instance, the books that he's written that I haven't read, they've kind of, he said that they're not channeled as such, but he's produced them as a result of this impulse to write them, and that he feels that the impulse has come from some source outside of himself. And that source is to do with the spontaneous force of nature. I think that's how I understood it. And I think he's sort of referring to this sort of creative and spontaneous aspect of us, and maybe that's coming from some sort of again, sort of more global source. So if I get the impulse to do some sort of creative act, or maybe even a destructive act, I can listen to myself and ascertain that sometimes these are thoughts that emanate from myself inside my head, but other times there's a force from outside of me, but that's compelling me to do something. And I think he was discussing that force. Is that right, DB? Right, DB saying what he was talking about reminded me of what Gary and Hugh talked about with what's that, paraclete. It also makes me think of the muse too, inspiration that comes spontaneously. Yeah, I don't remember the details of the conversation between Gary and Hugh, because I have no memory of anything, but that resonates with me, what you're saying there.
I think, and I think he was not only talking about something coming from outside, it was coming from inside. It was an impulse that he couldn't even resist, and that it was nature speaking through him.
Yes, it was within him, but it emanated from something other than his ego self.
Yeah, but that's in a terms of okay, but it was there was no separation really in what he was saying, but we're just really talking on terms that are just, yeah, but what you said exactly reflects what he's saying at the beginning of his conversation, and the enthusiasm is in which he communicated that experience of the impulse really resonated with me very much. Something that you cannot resist, something that's it's just pushing you. You know, he really explains that very well, and I understand that. Nothing in the rational or thinking could even explain why you're doing it, but you're just drawn to it, you know?
Yeah, and was he referring to the idea that you know, sometimes we maybe are resistant to that impulse, and he seemed to be suggesting you know, that it's a positive thing to learn to follow that impulse, and he moderates it. I think he was trying to qualify that he moderates his following of that impulse in terms of if the impulse was in some way going to be harmful. He wasn't suggesting. But in other words, if that impulse came and it was to genocide, I don't think he'd be recommending that anybody follow that. But if the impulse is going to ask you to make a painting, or, you know, compel you to write a book, or, you know, sail the oceans, then you would go along with it. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, he said at one stage that if you're compelled to go in a certain direction without knowing the why, that's not your ego. If you don't know the why, you can nearly know that it's coming from your true self.
Yes, that's the way to recognize that sort of impulse.
Yeah.
And so following that sort of impulse, well, again, he's talking about that as a positive thing to do. I don't know if I ever follow that sort of impulse, or if I tend to resist them. And again, yeah, sort of the idea resonated with me. How does this yeah, I think it's something, maybe it sounds like a sort of invitation to be more broadly connected to natural forces, perhaps. All right. DB is saying the impulse has to be tempered, but it goes both ways. The forces, the forces temper the intellect, but temperance goes the other way too. I'd never do a job if I totally followed my inspiration and muse all day, every day. I mean, yeah, to some extent, that to me almost sounds like an advertisement for just following your muse all day and every day. And I suppose one's tempted also to think that one of the reasons that people have to do a job is to perhaps you know, distract them from following this sort of impulse. Is it right? Are we satisfied to refer to this thing as the muse? Again, Kastrup talked about daemon, and I remember coming across the term, but I can't remember what it means, as usual. So a daemon is, it's a Greek term. Let's see. No, a demon. Yeah, because I remember he talked about Socrates, as we like to call him. And so a daemon in Greek is also demon. Term is used interchangeably with theos for God. I'm not sure. I think that the thingy, is it, if I lesser, here we go. Daemon is an ancient Greek word referring to lesser supernatural beings. So I don't know if he's interpreted the use of the word. Can anybody, well, I don't think it's a distraction. It's more like the impersonal forces don't really care about the standards of society. Yeah, I suppose that's sort of one of those things where you wonder about the degrees of agency in the way the social system is arranged, and whether there's intent behind the way things are set up or not, isn't it? So that's a good question. So yeah, so okay, so there is this question. I mean, I suppose if there's not something anybody wants to talk about, and if we can't get our teeth and riff on the subject, there's no point in going on about it. But since I'm here already, I thought there was a sense. Yeah, I like the way he was talking about this idea that there were basically impulses that they come inside the person, but they're not from inside the person strictly, and it's a sort of muse or a force of nature. And as Inish reminded me, he was explaining that you can identify that impulse being external because you feel strongly drawn to doing it, but you don't know why, and that your ego or your self, or the the mundane self, always has sort of rationalizations for things. So when you do something and you have a sense of like, I'm doing this because of that, that's not necessarily that impulse. But when the impulse happens, there's no reason, you feel compelled to follow it. That's the force that we're talking about. And yeah, again, just to sort of summarize, my impression is that it's being a sort of some way tuned in to the natural order of things, and maybe it's following a sort of deeper tendency. And again, yeah, that resonated with me. I thought it was interesting. And at the same time, I felt like that the guy had a sort of feeling that he had to come up with some sort of theory about it. And he felt like he knew something. And
so,
that's the point of it. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I was just
Please.
thinking. There is something that I know about this in terms of like I can't speak to it completely because I need to go away and come back on this. But it's really
Welcome to
interesting
the
what you're
club.
talking about because there was a series. So there's a writer who was so there's a series on YouTube about Julius Evola, and he talked a lot about this. And there's a channel on YouTube called Philosophy Cat, and she has done. So he was a pretty dense writer and thinker in the mid 20th century. I mean, if you look on YouTube straight away, you're going to find that all like the mainstream just deems him to be a fascist. He did have some pretty spicy views on certain, and he did align slightly with that side of things. But I think it's worth looking at because I think it's pretty heavy and dense. Like if you were to, he wrote a book called Revolt Against the Modern World, and in that I'm in a long-running series on this, and I haven't touched on it recently. It's quite heavy. She's done some really good series on it. The production quality on it is actually really good. But I was sort of taking in the first few videos, and I hadn't. But the next video in the series, which I was sort of, it was a while ago, but it was they were touching on this very subject about the topic of daemons and how we all have a daemon, and I can't speak to it because, as I say, I can't remember what his thinking was on it, but it's somewhere along, aligned with what you're talking about. And Evola is very much in the sort of, he thinks that humans have been in decline since like eons. Like it's crazy. Like he sort of deems it to be way before. I mean, what he classifies to be the modern world is kind of not the 20th century, but going back kind of much further back, which is quite interesting take on things. But anyway, I'll see if I can link the channel because she's got some good videos about this guy, and he's written some. From what I understand, to even attempt to read the books, you kind of need like a pre-former, like a little starter to sort of get you in the frame of mind to understand it. So actually, yeah, sounds quite. Her videos are quite good because she's like quite clever and she's read them all, and yeah, she's got quite a good channel. But yeah, that's my sort of thoughts on what you're on about. But I haven't watched this chap that you're talking about, but I'm sure it kind of links.
Yeah, I found one of the videos. I think I started watching some of those and didn't get all that far with it. I think possibly because it's quite there was a long series of things, and there's so many long series of things So yeah, again, Evola, I don't know. I just thought I'd take the opportunity while someone else was talking to see what's going on and see if there's something a bit more concrete about Kastrup was referring to as Damon. And I quite like the idea. Oh, wall of text. I quite like the idea of sort of riffing just like this on something I don't know about, because I think that's I don't know. I like being in a place of not knowing anything, because I think as soon as anybody seems to know anything about anything, you end up thinking they're an idiot. So if you think I'm an idiot to start with, then you're not going to be disappointed. Now, we've got this whole idea of Damon. I think it looks like Kastrup's into Jung. And again, I don't know very much about Jung. I haven't really studied Jung. And I'm completely out of touch with most sort of cultural things. Yeah, okay, Divine Beast says they don't know either. I think that not knowing is a thing. I mean, this is, I suppose, the thing, and if no one else wants to talk, then I'm just gonna yeah, I know Inish knows that she doesn't know. And I think knowing that we don't know stuff is quite important. And listening to Kastrup, I quite enjoyed his talk until I thought, here's a guy who's starting to a little bit feel like he knows something, and we can't kind of help ourselves, I guess, from feeling like we know something, because otherwise you end up in this sort of state of almost impossible ambivalence, and it can provoke, I think, anxiety a lot of the time. I know that I feel that the extent to which I don't know anything makes me feel kind of anxious. But at the same time, I feel like instead of defending myself against that anxiety with then starting to pretend that I know something, that I would rather try and reconcile this not knowing with some ability to feel sort of secure in that. And at this time, and again, this is where, you know, we sort of talked about whether or not there's much of a benefit to paying attention to world events, and I'm increasingly thinking that there isn't. But, you know, we want to sort of try and create a theory or a sort of narrative in our own heads that we sort of feel like we know what's going on. And within the context of that, I mean, we're all collapsniks, if we don't want to use the label doomers, but, you know, as people who've kind of come to a conclusion that's outside of the mainstream, we're in a situation where you do sort of risk feeling like you're knowing something, but we don't really know it. Yeah, I don't know. Again, I don't know where that's going, because I guess I need someone to jump in and sort of either bat back or whatever. Usually GS has something to say, but today he's distracted. Ellie, do we want to...
Listen, Bob. I think Tidy Bob, sorry. I mean, I think that what you said is extremely good on that video of Kastrup. Now, some of us haven't, I've watched it, some of us hasn't. So it's a little bit difficult to exchange in a group when not everybody has, you know, we've done that before, and we've talked about a post on Reddit that was nice, that two of us liked and the other people hadn't looked at it. So it was the conversation, we would have needed to plan that in advance, and that we would have taken notes, or all of us watched that to talk about it. I think that this video represents one in many rare insights of interesting people who are exploring the same things we are exploring, really in a different way, and probably with different approach. So we're kind of going back on things that we're familiar with. When I felt, when I listened to him, a familiarity with what he was talking about. I felt, okay, guy, yeah, I know what you mean. I've had this impulse, this irresistible, irrational thing that has completely changed my life several times, twice at least in my life. So I know that there was no reason for it, and there was no outcome. I know exactly, it resonated with me. But again, I don't know, can we really exchange, all of us, because between DB, myself, and maybe you, I don't know if you've watched it all, Bob, Ellie and Going South is not there, so it's difficult to continue to comment on this video unless we had it streamed continuously and we stopped it every minute and commented on every page. If there is one thing I think that we can get out of this, is that there's more and more people on the internet now that are sharing these sort of modern mental, I say not gurus, but these sort of insights. And what I want to analyze a little bit is to see where he's going with this. I don't know this guy, you see. It's just that video just came out of the blue. I don't know if this guy is a guru. I don't know, is he got a lot of people that he's trying to get, or is it just sharing his experience? Does anybody know about him? Because what I see in YouTube is he's the executive director of Essentia Foundation. So I don't know. I don't know what it is. I have no idea. We get a lot of this stuff. I find a lot of this stuff in my feed too, because I'm interested in certain things. So I get directed to people who are using words that are probably in the algorithm in terms of ego, reality, meaning, culture, and that gets a soup of people that will pop out, as Alan Watts does, and a few other people like that. But we don't want to be too. I don't know. There's so many of these people popping out now, and it says a lot about the times we're in. And I remember Lord Hugh warning us about collapse times and the rise of different cults. And I want to be a bit critical there. I don't want to blacken the message of Bernardo, because he seems to be a very genuine enthusiast guy, but it would be interesting to discuss this appearance of these cults in the times that we're in. Have you got any of you got anything to say about this? Because that's what he brought to my mind.
He brought to mind about the various cults that are popping up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, GS. Yeah, that was very distracting having the chat come up there. Yeah, I mean, there seems to be, I don't know if is this a phenomenon just related to the fact that it's so easy to do mass communication now, in the sense that we're doing something that's being broadcast at least potentially to unlimited numbers of people. Hugh's outlook and narrative about things managed to reach a vast number of people that it probably wouldn't have in the absence of the internet and YouTube in particular. Again, I don't know, somebody like Bernardo Kastrup. There's all these sort of various intellectual figures, I suppose, if you want to call them that. And then they do seem to have cult followings. So, yeah, there is a prevalence of cults, isn't there? And yeah, it's tempting, isn't it? It's tempting to get into following a cult, but obviously anybody who's following any other cult than the cult of Hugh is on the wrong path.
Well, when we were calling ourselves a cult, and Hugh was calling himself a cult leader, if my memory is good, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we were going to use the dynamics of this to kind of fuel the ARG. We were going to, because it was needed in the framework of an ARG to have this type of dynamic. We were shown the examples of the two ARGs that he talked about, and I don't know if you remember the conversations about this. Now, I'm not talking about this sort of cult. I'm talking about the ones that emerge in times of plagues and catastrophes and what we're facing now, and they can be religious, they can be of any type. The cult dynamic, and I was wondering if all these so-called awakened people at the moment who are appearing on the internet, who are saying, well, I've seen the light now and I'm awake and I'm enlightened and follow me, are belonging to this sort of ancient sort of cult dynamic that is not going to lead us to any nice outcome. And I think that what Hugh was saying, and I really agree with that, is that you choose your cult carefully.
Yeah, I think that my recollection or my impression of what Hugh's reference is that he and again, the perspective would change, obviously, or my perception of it maybe change, but on one hand there was a sort of self-referential idea of Extinctionati being a cult in a sort of humorous application of the idea. It was a sort of self-deprecating joke in a way, and then there was the other element of Hugh talking about using the knowledge that all human interactions are cult-like in some way, and then any group of human beings is ultimately a cult. I think that's what he was saying, and he's basically wanted to maybe try and use that natural dynamic or that natural tendency of human gatherings to do something positive with it, which I'm skeptical that's really possible, and I think he was probably skeptical of that as well. But that's my recollection of what his take was. So it was kind of a jokey thing on one hand, and at the same time sort of recognizing, because I remember he used to say, oh, everything is a cult, Coca-Cola is a cult, and the government is a cult, and the army is a cult, and I don't know, vegans are a cult, and these people and those people, everyone's a bunch of cults. And I often think people are a bunch of cults as well, but maybe I don't always pronounce it exactly like that. Yeah, so yeah, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? And I don't think that the Extinctionati really manifested anything that cultish, really, because that's a bit like trying to herd cats.
Of course, I know what you mean, and it was tongue-in-cheek when we were talking about it. It was, the humor was there, but and it was knowingly using the word cult to explain. But don't forget the dynamic that was happening in the meetings when Hugh was there was a bit of a cult dynamic. He used to be leading the talks. He used to be, we couldn't even intervene most of the time. And most of the posts on the sub were from him, and he was leading kind of the subjects of the day and the subjects of the week or the meeting. But it was purposely done for helping maybe our personal development, psychological resilience in times of collapse. And as you said, it was humorous, and he was very humorous about it. It was not taken seriously. It was used. It's like a tool that you use, and you don't let the tool use you. It was an analogy a bit to the alien cortex too. You can put a bit of alien cortex to facilitate your life and help you in a few things, but if it starts to take over, you're basically fucked. So, and as we are. Yes, we are. I know, but to come back to what I was saying about the cultish thing you see, most people in a cult are not aware that they're in a cult, and that's what he was saying when he was talking about corporations, army, things like that. It's so I looked a little bit on his that guy Kastrup's website. And it's called the Essentia Foundation. There's a lot of very interesting intellectual things on physics, on the nature of reality, quantum physics. There's plenty to read. There's not. It doesn't have a lot of. And I think I'm going to look at it a bit better and maybe report back when I've kind of studied it a bit, but that video was, for me, the first part mostly was very good. He was sharing honestly an experience, and he was kind of, but on the other hand, I'm always cautious, so I want to look into it a bit more. I'm going to study a little bit his website. You see, it's like we've had a few people who have come up on the sub who have very kindly shared very interesting videos and talks from people that are in the internet there, and I have gone a bit deeper and looked, and then I come back saying, oh, I don't know, it ends up by that one is talking about aliens, UFOs. The other one will be, there's always something that you find out that suddenly is just, but on the other hand, it was good material for conversation. And we've talked about this this impulse there. That is that related to? Would that be related to the notion of synchronicity too? What do you think?
Well, that's another Jungian
Yeah.
term, isn't it? And he's written books about Jung, but I don't know anything myself about. I mean, synchronicity. Again, I've got the loosest idea of what that means. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I looked into this guy. I suppose the problem is, for me, the more I listen to all this stuff, and the more I'm trying to explore, and just to refer to DB saying trying to get down to the truth is how to set people free. I think maybe looking for the truth might be liberating, but finding the truth is the opposite of that. Is imprisoning, or what's the opposite of liberating? Is stifling. And
well, yes, and that's what DB says. You can't really profit from the truth. And that's why the problem is that's the problem of the outcome. Okay, I found the truth, and now we're going to bid this, we're going to do that. It's yes, I can see what you mean. Yes, so you agree that synchronicity is related to these forces, and they're part of the same circle of forces that exist beyond us, and that act without our control, without anything that we can explain, and without any aim or outcome. And that's why I was very intrigued by what that guy was saying, because it really resonated in me, and I have experienced it firsthand. And I wonder if people here in the group have experienced firsthand these life-changing impulses, or in creativity, or in life in general. I'm not talking about falling in love or things like that, but I'm talking about really impulses that you would have never thought would have happened, and that completely turned things upside down for you.
yeah, does it even have to be something that turns things upside down?
No, not necessarily, but that could just, but not necessarily, you're right, but just something that happened that you hadn't decided, and that you were drawn to, that you couldn't resist, like if you were taken by a river.
Yeah, I mean, I think also, I mean, can I just check, so the idea of synchronicity as well means when various events that are not obviously materially related seem to sort of correspond to each other. Is that right? So when you drive the car and all the traffic lights are green, and you have a meaningful sense that the universe is sort of acting synchronously with your will or with your needs or whatever. Do I understand that idea correctly? Is that synchronicity? Okay, well, we'll leave that.
Synchronicity is phenomenon that you notice that will be happening at the same time in different conditions and with different, but they are happening at synchron, means in Greek soon, chronos means at the same time.
Yeah, but things that are happening at the same time that seem meaningful for happening at the same time. So when you have a sense like, I'm trying to think actually, trying to think of an example. But as I said, that was my only example, is like when the traffic lights all seem to be green at the time that your car is going through them, is one example I would have thought. Or if, I don't know, when you go somewhere, I can't think of any examples, but basically when those sort of magical things happen, that the universe seems to align in a particular way to make things happen that suit our needs or desires. Is that it?
Yeah.
We need, come on, DB, you must have an example of synchronicity. It happened to me in the office, but spent time with a wolf at a sanctuary before I went. Sorry, I'm not reading that very, sorry. I'm going to read out from DB. Yes, I think synchronicity is related to the impersonal forces / demons, etc. It happened to me in the Air Force before I got out. I spent time with a wolf at a sanctuary before I went into the military. When I started going through training, all 3 squadrons I had in the Air Force were called Wolf Pack. Yeah, that I understand that. I really feel like wolves harried me out of the military to be where I am now. So the sort of, that's that feeling that the forces of the universe are kind of aligning in a way that's meaningful to somebody. Yeah, that's kind of curious.
I
So
don't even think it's you can even detect the meaning, the meaningfulness, if I may say, the sense of it, because you probably will see it. If it's a synchronicity, maybe because you get a signal. But the impulse that he was talking about and the impersonal forces he's talking about work in funny ways. And you can always try to rationalize them at the start and say, doing this for this or that. But at the end of the day, it's a force of nature that is pulling you, or that is pushing you, or that is carrying you. And there's not necessarily a meaning that you can grasp in it. And the humility of what he said about this was very striking, because it's an egoless process, if you know what I mean.
yeah, you had to sort of, you had to let your ego out of it.
You have to surrender. You have to accept. You can't. It's not you that's acting. It's not you that's working. It's something much bigger that's working there, and you won't even. You can't interpret it. You can't put a meaning. You are just in it.
And so, yeah, so for some, however incomplete our understanding, or certainly mine, is of this notion, though there's something that's resonating with us, and maybe within the context of the narrative that we're interested in, is this, I mean, I suppose to me, I don't know really. I suppose I need to really think about how this applies to this scenario. But I suppose when we're talking about mechanisms for strengthening ourselves internally, do you have some idea of how listening to this impulse might be useful to us? I guess I would suggest maybe something like, as events cause society to change, maybe this kind of allowing this impulse to guide us might be a useful tool.
But maybe it's not
cold.
in terms of usefulness that we should think of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we're in a game, and you take a kind of a gamble on something, and you just go with that. And I don't think we need to find any use, or if we start to think that way, we're entering a dangerous territory. Oh, you have to go, Bob. Okay, so going south is somewhere else. Bob is, I don't know, probably gone somewhere. DB cannot talk. So it's me and you, Ellie. So are you still there? This is a funny meeting. Okay. But while we're having a recess there, I wanted to share with you an idea I had.
I'm still here. Yeah.
Oh, good. I exchanged a message with Going South the other day, or yesterday, or the day before, because we're coming up in a month to the anniversary of Hugh's death, which was on the 17th of February. And I was wondering, do you want to do something special, like a meeting about it, or do you want to just leave it and we do ourselves our little personal thing? Or I don't want to be pompous and ceremonial and not that sort of stuff, because it's not really his style. But of course, we all remember him, and we might remember him in our hearts, in our own little place. And we don't have I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I think
that
could be nice to just maybe everyone can, we can just have a meeting and people can reflect on Hugh's impact on their life through that time. I think it's quite a poignant. I'm still reeling from it, really. I've had such big changes in my life in the last 4 years, really, from like splitting up with a long-term partner, and then that was kind of that was sort of really came to a head kind of literally just before COVID, and then obviously I think I found Hugh's channel in 2019, kind of in the middle of when I was going through that breakup, and that was kind of, it was just also, it really spoke to me, all of his sort of logic and his thinking on where we're at, and then obviously joining the meetings started kind of, I guess I started joining them, yeah, it was kind of right around when the lockdowns started, from what I remember. So yeah, I don't know. I think it could be quite interesting to, yeah, have a little, and then of course, yeah, obviously all through COVID and all the sort of formation of the group, as it were, like, the meetings, and but especially you have to remember there might be, I mean, there probably isn't that many people listening to us these days, but people might be interested to know. I don't know,
Yeah,
because
I was
not a lot of
thinking.
people said anything really. It was quite. I think a lot of people were like, "Oh, what happened?" And I don't know. I don't think any of us really wanted to talk that much, but that was my impression.
I was thinking that we were so lucky to have, or lucky, I don't know if lucky is the word, but in any case, we had a live show when was hit by the blood clot or the thing, right? And so he was actually talking with a special guest, I think on a Wednesday show or something, when he just disappeared from us, right? He just went offline, and so I was planning for myself to watch that recording, to process what had happened, but I never did, and I think that's kind of an emotional reason that I didn't. So I was just thinking that maybe watching that half hour or full hour, I don't even know how long the recording was, but maybe watching the last 20 minutes or something of you being live with us, and then just disappearing from our lives, even though he was sick and then died like 5 to 10 days later. So I was just thinking that might be a way to kind of process it, and we could, play and pause and play, and let the different members reflect or talk about it. So that's just a suggestion that I throw out there.
Yeah, I like it. I like it because it's a tribute. And yeah, when he disappeared, he disappeared after about 30, 40 minutes, and we continued a little bit, but we said after that we were going to interrupt it because we were not, I think I was there and there was a few of us, and we were not prepared to interview the guy recluse that he was talking to. And it was a specific subject that they were going to talk about, and nobody was prepared. So we shortened the meeting, and we were hoping that Hugh would come back online, and of course he never did. But yeah, so it wouldn't be that long, and we could yeah, I can understand what you're saying, that it's very emotional to watch that the last online meeting. I actually haven't watched it in a long time. I watched it, I don't know how many times, when he disappeared, because we didn't know what had happened at the time. So I was trying to find clues. I was trying to find if there was not Men in Black who had come to take him
me
away or
too.
something. But after that, I left it in the corner because, yeah, emotionally it was. And I'm the same as you, Tom. I'm still really, it takes a long time when you lose somebody like that. It takes a long time. Even after a year, you still miss him, and you're still grateful, immense gratitude for what he has started, and the process he has started. At least that is an impulse that he has given. That is continuing, even though we're not doing at all the same things we were doing when he was there, but we're still on his trajectory. And yeah, thank you, Going South. I really think it's a good idea to start with. And if anybody has got any other idea, I didn't have any because you mentioned that one to me and I thought that would be good. I didn't think of anything else apart from personal things. But as of now, what is the 17th of February? Is it a weekday or is it, let me have a look on the calendar, February, wait a second now, 17th. It's a Friday, so no. So it could be the weekend, the 19th after that, the meeting that's after that. And we could do what you said if you wanted to do that. Is there anybody out there? So DB, you say you associate a song with Hugh. Let me see what it is. Sleeping at Last. Oh, yeah, Sleeping at Last. I won't listen to it now, but I will listen to it later on. Yeah. Gary sent me a beautiful poem from Walt Whitman on the same subject. I'll post the link in a minute. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so that sounds good. Anybody wants to continue on the subject of what we were talking about before? On Walt, yeah, Walt Whitman is my favorite American poet. Definitely. I discovered him very young, and he really speaks to me. It's not only he speaks to my heart immediately. It goes straight to the heart.
I have a terribly hard time with poetry myself because I don't know what it means. A lot of the time, anyway.
What do you mean? What do you mean you don't know what it means?
Well, it's a sort of, it's not the same as like, I don't know, how do you say that? What does it mean? You know, poems, they're funny, isn't it? You're never quite sure I'm never quite sure what they're saying. It's a sort of music, isn't it? Where if you try and understand the words.
That's just what DB has written. Poetry is like music of
Oh,
man.
right, okay, there you go.
Yeah, it is. That's what it is. And that's
Right.
why it can reach levels that are not can't be reached by prose, because it's so connected to music. It's the musical side of the language, which is completely different to the other use of language, which is usually reductionist or rational. So it's like perverting the language's purpose to a higher purpose, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I remember in school they used to try and explain poems by making you break it down into elements of this, and it was
Oh,
this
yeah.
horrible
It's dreadful.
scientific process, and I think that
That's dreadful.
yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I posted that poem there, Captain, my captain. So there you go.
I know that's something to do with a film called The Dead Poets Society, but I didn't know the whole poem.
Oh.
And that was a schmaltzy sort of thing. So, but yeah. Well, I suppose you need to read it out loud then, don't you, really? You shouldn't read a poem. Is that right?
No, and they come to you, you know. You should listen to. I think my favorite way of encountering poetry is readings. When somebody reads a poem, or when it's the poet itself, but it's totally different than reading it in a book, or this. What for personally is my favorite. That's why I can understand the relation with music. Because suddenly when you read a poem, you get the rhythm, you get everything, you just get it whole. You don't, you know what I mean? I don't know if I can explain well what I mean tonight. I'm just yes, it's lyrical. So we have stopped talking about Bernardo Kastrup, because in fact the second part, I mean, the first part was very interesting because it brought on the idea of nature working through you with impulses. The other part was much more, the second part was much more things that we have talked about a lot, and I didn't find anything new in what he was saying, except another man who's trying to make sense of certain things and who's trying to get to know himself better, and who's following. So that I think it might be just the moment to stop talking about that thing. Is there any other things that because this week I don't know, I don't listen to the news anymore at all because I have too much to do with putting up with the weather and my daily life, and also I'm not really don't want to listen to the news, and I'm not on social media, so I can't bring you nice new things about what's going on in the world. But I was discussing with Tidy Bob the Chinese onslaught of COVID cases in the last couple of weeks, and the millions of cases that are happening, and the bizarre way that the Chinese government and party made a U-turn on their policies of zero COVID, and the immediate response, which was travel allowed, work allowed, and then circulation of a virus that's causing a lot of deaths and a lot of infections, and probably a lot of effects on the Chinese economy and Chinese daily life. So have you heard anything more than I have on that subject? Because I'm kind of wondering what is the agenda there from the Chinese authorities? What happened?
Yeah, I'm wondering about this as well. Like, I can't get my head around it, but the only thing that I can draw a parallel with is on like the geopolitical level, when you see that what's happening, that China and Saudi Arabia and Russia and all of the BRICS countries seem to be, gearing up for this rapidly separating world where they're moving to start doing deals together. I mean, you had Xi in Saudi Arabia. They brought out all of the pomp and ceremony, and when Biden went, he barely got like a high five or something. And the world is realigning before our eyes. Well, it already, I suppose you could say, in the last year with the whole Ukraine situation, that China is now looking to do deals elsewhere, and the whole Silk Road thing, and maybe it's part of the sort of kicking the nuts into the supply chain side for things that the West needs. I don't know if that's kind of like, maybe it's like a sort of sabotage. And then of course all the economics of the how they've basically done. So Saudi Arabia have the oil and resource economics, all of that is being aligned so that they're all starting to do. So we're moving towards like a petro yuan as opposed to the petrodollar. So, that would kind of maybe make sense that is part of the strategy. I don't know, I don't think you can believe anything that's coming out of China in terms of like what their reasoning, when their official line is, whatever that is, about COVID deaths and the severity of the COVID. I mean, why would it be? I don't understand. It originated there. Why would it suddenly be worse than? I mean, we're all over it. Is it because, I guess the mainstream media line from the West is that their vaccine was no good? I mean, yeah. I just think
that's what they're saying, isn't it? That the Chinese vaccine was shit. But I thought they're saying now that this vaccine is shit.
Yeah.
This brings back this whole, who knows, what is going on here? This is really the thing. What the fuck is going on? I thought we weren't dealing with this. What the fuck is going on? And this is where Kastrup
This is coming back to last
fucking
week.
Kastrup, he then speculates that he's got some idea of what's going on. And that's the point at which I thought, no, you're a nincompoop. And okay, yeah, Ellie, come on, throw us something here. What the fuck is going on? Is there something called COVID? Is there a vaccine? Is the vaccine really trying to wipe out humanity? Is COVID going to wipe out humanity? Because there seems to be like these contingents of people, and I mentioned this to Inish the other day, I think, where it seems like all the people who have first of all, a lot of people that I consider, not that I'm considering myself some sort of authority on the matter, but people that I consider who really have insight into lots of topics, then seem to be completely unfucking hinged about COVID. And there seems to be a contingent of people who still think COVID is like the end of the world and saying, oh, we should be masking and there's long COVID and this is terrible and it's awful and blah, blah, blah. And then there's this other contingent of people going, there's no COVID, stop worrying about it. But who gives a shit about it? It's all finished and it's passed and blah, blah, blah. And you need to worry about the vaccines, not the illness. And that's it. I have no way of gathering myself some perspective on anything around this whole scenario. And China suddenly decided to like let everybody die, or what the hell? You didn't have COVID.
Live streaming is on.
So I can definitely agree with that. So yeah, I mean, Ellie, you're in the UK where COVID officially is neither here nor there, but everybody I know is ill all the time. People got respiratory illnesses. Everybody who's taking the vaccine. Oh, I'm being uncareful with this word.
You are reflecting. You are
Everyone's
reflecting.
having a heart attack.
You are totally reflecting what DB is saying about the fact that we are slowly collapsing everywhere, and we don't understand what's going on because it's collapsing. So China's plan, we were discussing that China's Belt and Road plan is collapsing due to supply chains and disruptions due to all sorts of factors. So they had to get people back to work because the economy is collapsing. So they let people go back to work, and then COVID hits. Here we're dealing with denial of being taken for a ride, most of us, and also of a collapsing health system everywhere that's not even able to face the normal amount of sick people that are presenting themselves sick because of our global industrial civilization, most of them. So we're in this spiral of collapse. So what we're spectators of the spiral of looking at things going down, and we don't know what's going on. Because
it's information overload. It's complexity. A complex system which then creates its own problems, which then feed into other, complex problems. And this is what COVID is, like the perfect storm of our fragile society, like our just-in-time society. But I don't know if it's helpful to get to go down the 4D chess rabbit holes too much now. I've given up. I think there's still a lot of people that are like, wasting a lot of time and thinking like that. I think it's a very multi-layered set of, so you could start dividing it into clearly, like it probably was something that got accidentally got out of a lab. I think we can say that. But then why I'm saying, yes. I'm questioning, saying, oh, I don't know if China is deliberately now like actually just locking people up just to screw the economy. I mean, who knows? I haven't really bothered spending time thinking, what use does that do? But I would say, I think it kind of, you could see that could be a thing. But then I don't know, everything, like, there's so many, you could just spend endless time on the internet. It's like the information overload on all this kind of stuff is just, you're never going to know, like, it's a bit like, we have this idea of like, we tell ourselves stories about historical events like the Second World War and things, and people still cling on to all the narrative around that, and we seem to have clung on to it so much that now it's almost like this myth about who we are as a nation in the UK and things. And clearly it's not all true the way that you were told in history books. So like, I don't know but I think from our point of view, it's just like, just watch and marvel at the craziness of it all. I mean, it's pretty incredible times to be living, but I don't think you'll ever be able to make sense of it all. So I guess you just have to focus on, the things that are important now, and trying to not, get sucked down the rabbit hole too much. But I don't know. It's lovely. That's why I did love Hugh, because he had so many crazy rabbit holes. It was just like, oh my God, like, where do you go next? It's, and the guests sort of made it more real, didn't they? Because a lot of these people that we spoke to were, Kevin and people. I mean, what happened to him? I don't even, has anyone seen his channel lately? What does he think?
He's joined Zelensky, I think. Those are the people after his own heart, I think. But no, Hugh's genius for spinning narratives, that was something else, because it had this, for me, a combination of sort of familiar themes that I knew about, but also bringing in new angles. And that's so rare. I mean, the question that comes up is it worth like just really actively disengaging from any of these narratives now? Yeah, I don't think Hugh was that bound, was he? I think he was quite flippant about contradicting his own stories, and that made it even more interesting and intriguing. But I mean, obviously, I for one am not wanting to speak for anybody else, but I have not even a shred of a molecule of Hugh's verbal and intellectual capacity. I'm just thinking whether it's probably a good idea,
I think,
to sort of try and disengage from everything, no?
Yeah. He was something else, wasn't he? I think the funniest thing actually just popped into my head about the last thing I heard, because I hadn't really heard much of that. Everything's just been so, like focused on strikes, NHS, the war in Ukraine. I was quite amazed. I didn't know there was that. Which MP was it? It was in the news the other day. He's been like fully suspended, and he's just recently been tweeting that COVID is a genocide. The vaccine is all, designed to take out, it's a new Holocaust, and he's been like fully removed from his, he's under investigation, or like basically, had some disciplinary. I can't remember who it is though, but I was like, bloody hell, that was like, it's quite something that, an active, MP in Parliament was, because you had a few people standing up, during the whole lockdown thing, and there was some very strident, few of them, but they were there. Trying to think who they were now, and they were mainly speaking out against the craziness of the lockdowns. That it was destroying businesses, and just the absolute, complete over the topness about it. Like how, basically locking up all the healthy, and just the restrictions. But this was like another level. This guy was like, he'd fully been down the rabbit hole, so to speak, and was going with the full bore narrative that it is actually a bioweapon and all this kind of thing.
A guy called Andrew Bridgen.
Andrew Bridgen, that's it.
No idea who he is. I don't know if he's a Tory or Labour. Not that is a distinction.
I think he might
anymore.
have been Tory.
Not that it ever was. But there was a guy called Malhotra who got on the BBC recently and was interviewed and said something about the vaccines not being that brilliant. And there's been a massive backlash about that as well. How could the BBC allow such a terrible? But again, nobody's. There isn't anything you can get a grip on here at all. So as Inish is saying, things are just collapsing. I mean, if you were saying, yes.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, if you were being really cynical, you would say, well, if you think there's like some dastardly plan here, then I mean, particularly in this country, perfect storm, like obviously pandemic, lock down the whole population, and then you completely fuck the NHS because it's just exacerbated the problems, the pressure it was already under, because you have now delayed all of those people who should have been treated for things 2 years ago, so you've just added a pile more patients to the list. And so it's just, you could say, was that a deliberate policy to finally destroy it? I mean, you can get, there's just so many, but I just don't think that particularly politicians, they're not competent enough. I mean, yeah, okay, there's like super wealthy people are, but I just don't think that human beings are actually that competent to. Yeah, there's people that have got certain goals and they try different things, but if anything, this whole plan that the WEF, the World Economic Forum, were sort of talking about, I mean, how's that going to pan out now that, you know, we've just literally kicked ourselves and shot ourselves in the foot? We've cut ourselves off of the world's biggest energy supply. We've stolen all the money that they had in our economy, and they've said, okay, see you later. So now they're going to align, and we're going to be the poorer for it in the future. You know, I mean, in what's left of the resource wars, and it could lead to nuclear war. I mean, it's not looking good, is it? Every flipping day we're sending more weapons, more tanks. If we get this really cold snap coming in Ukraine for the remainder of the winter, I think some people think there's going to be a full-on cold snap, because I think it has been relatively mild. Then maybe Putin will send more tanks in, and you can see what he's doing though. He's playing the long game in terms of destroying Ukraine's energy, and it is. I think he's even said it is a direct war against the West. It's not about Ukraine. It's about kicking America in the nuts and getting them out of Europe. But that could easily escalate. So dangerous situation.
Yeah, the Americans could start a nuclear war. And I think the plan is to get the European industrial sector to move to America in the last gasp of the American empire. So you can drop Europe in the shit there. All the car companies and, you know, heavy industry will move to America because their energy is affordable. And Europe becomes a sort of backwater, but in a way, that's a good thing. I mean, I'm looking forward to see how England.
But America doesn't have any. America doesn't have the right type of oil. They don't have the heavy, thick stuff anymore. Like all of this decent oil is not. It's not in America. I think a lot of it is in Russia and some in the Middle East now. But it's not. They
is it possible that the Americans don't know that well enough and they're deluding themselves? So they're going to fuck everything and then die. Oh yes, please.
I think it's more just actually that the market demands. Like I heard this oil. I don't know if I posted that. There was that guy, Art Berman, and he was saying it's just like basically what you need the investment to just suddenly re-gear like the whole refinery. They've got like huge refineries there, but they would have to like change the whole sector to start refining for that, you know, heavy oil, which I think in the last, you know, however long they've just had that decent, you know, sort of nice gloopy sort of like much lighter oil that they could do a lot with, but they've run out of that good stuff. So the stuff they have is like tar sands, which is obviously that was a boom and bust, wasn't it? There's not actually, you don't get that much from it. And then obviously the heavier stuff, which they're not geared for. So it's just economics. Like you'd have to plow, you know, billions into rejig it. And
that's the guy who was on Hagen's recently.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's quite interesting, when you start looking at all these layers of like geopolitics, it's like it's all just, it's not really. I don't think it's helpful to look at all this conspiracy shit. Just like look at how it's just like how it's the deck of cards is just stacking up against us. It's just, you know, how it's this complex systems that are fracturing everywhere. It's literally collapse, isn't it? I suppose. I don't know. It's probably because I'm a bit of an economics-y sort of like, I like watching these sort of people who have these geopolitics. They have a big background on history and geopolitics, and it's quite helpful to sort of see where this is all going by listening to those people. Whether or not they're right or wrong, they might be wrong. I don't know.
Well, I think that what we were learning a bit like when the meetings were with you is, number one, not to get involved in politics and not to get embroiled in all that game, and to have an outsider view that was coming from an Extinctionati point of view of we're doomed, but how is this going to play out?
Mm.
We're watching for the signs of managed extinction, as we have been warned that could happen, and we've managed to detect them in certain operations that happened over the last 2 years. But also, that's why I brought up the subject of China, because an enormous machine like the Chinese Communist Party, making a U-turn of such a size, like, because for months we were hearing COVID zero, and we were seeing people being imprisoned and people being locked into their houses and everything, couldn't go to work, couldn't travel in the world, around the world, the economy of China was fine, and suddenly, bang. So those are the things, like, this is not because I'm interested in politics or in information, it's just because this is a symptom of the absurdity of what is happening in a collapse, because there is absolutely no rational explanation of what China is doing at the moment. I've read a lot of things. I cannot find anything. It's just all the journalists are observing it, and actually that's what journalism should be. It's just reporting,
But
not analyzing.
are those? Sorry, Sophie. Are those
Yeah,
reports? Are those reports coming that you're seeing? Are they all like independently verified? I mean, is that just what? Because this is the thing. They always say you can never trust what's coming out of China. So it's like, how do you know? Maybe that's what the Chinese state wants the outside to think. And I mean, granted, like, it's hard for them to like have a full iron curtain. They can't these days. It's almost impossible with the internet.
Game.
But
I agree with you. That's why I wanted to bring up the subject, because to me it seems so absurd. And I've checked the sources from different. I've looked at it from different sources. They're very reluctant in giving numbers, but they had to with the millions of COVID cases that are coming up. But yeah, you're right. Whatever we know on China is always whatever they want you to know. It's true. It's true. But it seems that the size of the infection over there, is very difficult to fake. Like the size of the lockdowns in China, there was always people managing to film and to manage to get little videos out and stuff like that. So what I'm getting is just 9 million cases at the moment. That's what I got today. 9. I know it's not maybe not much for the size of the population, but it's a lot if you think that they cancelled the COVID zero in the new year. Like, I'm no specialist, but I'm witnessing something that is absurd, and it's another one like the proxy war in Ukraine, like what you said about the sacrifice of energy that Europe is paying for the heavy price for now. All these things are symptoms of the collapse that's happening, and there's no point in trying to make sense of it. And that's what I think. We're there. Yeah.
Can we then? Is there a way for us to sort of direct our filters back towards the internal processes that we're going through? Because it's difficult to resist this sort of discussion of events, and maybe are we sort of being avoidant of, like, maybe we need to learn martial arts or something instead, or I don't know what. Some people here I know are gardening already. That's not something I'm doing. I don't know. Do we want to focus on self-work and making sure that everybody's growing some tomatoes? And
yeah, that's true. But there's also we have touched it on several occasions, and we did at the beginning of the meeting, because if we resonated with Bernardo Kastrup, it's because we are still, all of us, kind of focused on resilience psychologically, mentally, and spiritually. So yes, that's much more important than but still, I think that it's part of survival to watch the waves that are coming. You can't be totally in your little cabin, and like Hugh said, there's no escape. One day they'll come for you. So yeah, we need to go down to much deeper layers, I think, to prepare.
Yeah, I know I'm not resilient for one. So that's one of the things that I'm looking for. I don't think so. That's the thing. Maybe we don't know how resilient we are.
But what is resilience? We talked about it for a long time. We've talked about deep adaptation. We've talked about intense knowledge of yourself. We've talked about the 12 extinctionati things. But it's again welcoming collapse and at the same collapsing with the collapse, I must say. But at the same time, finding the love of life in the middle of all that. You know. And it's a vast subject. But that's resilience. Resilience is not a prepper. I don't see that as resilience.
Oh no, I don't think there's any material resilience to be sought, because that doesn't make any sense, does it? Someone's going to nick your stash of lentils.
No, it does make sense. I don't agree with you, because it makes sense if you think of your neighbors, if you think of other people, because you can always provide help for other people. We're in this collectively. We're not on our own, and every one of us has something to provide, to give, to help. So again, we have to think about what we can do for ourselves, but what we can contribute to the people around us. And what we're doing at the moment is that. But it's also in our immediate neighborhood. When you're going to see people being cold and hungry and sick, you're not going to just say, "Oh, well, sure, it's collapsed," like, let's go and meditate. You're going to be compelled to feed or to heal.
Oh no! I'm going to fucking go. I'm off to meditate. Thank you very much. We try to. I mean, this is the. I mean, I don't know what Ellie thinks about this, being a fellow Englander. Well, he's more of an Englander than I am, but I have a real profound sense of Schadenfreude towards the British public at the moment, because they were told from the 80s that the health service that they allegedly love so much is going to be dismantled. There was solid insight into the subject, and all they did was went, "Nah, no one's going to touch our NHS. You can't do anything to our NHS. No one's going to allow you to do anything to the NHS." And now there's no NHS, and there's people dying in corridors. And I do dislike myself for thinking this and even saying it even more. But I think, well, fuck off. Just fuck off. Drop dead already. I don't care. And, I kind of don't care if I drop dead either from that project. I don't mean that in a nihilistic way as such, but as in I accept the fact that the perceived system that's supposed to keep me alive is not there. I don't like them anyway, but in the event of a medical emergency, I'll be crying for a doctor, I'm sure. But there's something about it that titillates me, that it's gone to shit. And I'm low on sympathy, and I need to work on that. Ellie?
Yeah, I kind of see what you're saying. It is really quite shocking how bad our supposed leaders and government are, but this is it, isn't it? This is what we all know. As like a lot of you are like, I don't know if I'm a complete dyed-in-the-wool anarchist per se, but I mean I generally I'm very suspicious of the state, and I fully agree with all of the these ideas that the state just gradually naturally tends to make our lives worse, because ultimately it's about control. It's control of this Hobbesian bargain that we made, that we didn't ever sign, this contract. We just came into this world, and then obviously you're sort of like, the state says that, if it wasn't there, then we'd all resort to this barbarism, and, and they're there to impose these laws and things. And because we're all just, I mean, it does make me sick. I couldn't believe it. Last night there's a thing on TV, a flipping advert for the NHS, and you're like, oh, geez, like just the contradictions in the clown world we're living in now is just insane. Like, but the problem is most people just don't understand, like, that
it could be a hell of a lot better if we had less of this control over our lives. If you know, I'm not saying it would be perfect. It never would it? But of course it wouldn't. But what point did it go so badly wrong? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. It was ever. It was never perfect, but it was just. There was a point when it surely you had a balance, like maybe just before the First World War. I mean, if you listen to like people like Hitchens, they say that it was after the First World War that it all went to shit in this particular country. Anyway, you didn't used to have a passport before then, and obviously there were other things you didn't have, and there were poorhouses and there were debtors' prisons and things. But I mean, at least you could travel around and you were fairly free. And these days, everywhere you go, you feel like you're a fucking criminal. Like you're treated like you're assumed to be a criminal, and every action you take, it's disgusting. It's truly disgusting. But I don't know. Yeah. So I suppose you just have to rejoice that it's all coming apart at the seams now, and hopefully that the sooner the better. I mean, everything has to die, doesn't it? And this is what we're watching. We're watching our world die. So, yeah, I don't know. Sorry, it's a bit misanthropic, but that's all I have to say on that. I don't know. I don't think there's any. Yeah.
Yeah, but I remember
tragic.
an interview that when Hugh was still around that we had with Susan Green from Deep Green Resistance Ireland. And she said something similar to what you're saying now, Little Englander, saying Gaia is dying, our mother is dying. And she said, yeah, okay, she's dying, but you're not just going to grieve. You're going to just also stand up and try to do something to the people who have killed her. And, you know, just sitting there saying, okay, we're going down, we're going to be in a cabin, we're going to be in this, we're going to do... grow tomatoes, or we're going to just, you know, yeah, okay, but there is still things to give sense and to make fun in life and to enjoy life, which is just answering to this, because you can't. I mean, that's maybe I'm talking to myself, but I've been in my life. I've been a doctor. Well, okay, so that's I have in me a certain gift of helping people who suffer. So I know that it's a bit in my nature. And I mean, in Collapse, I will not just be in my little isolated house with my stock of food. I'm going to see probably people who are going to not get any treatment from hospitals and things like that, because everything is falling apart. So I even if I'm getting old now, I won't be able to have all the energy I had to treat people, but I know that it will come naturally to me to think, well, we're all in the same boat. We're going to go down. We might just go down without suffering too much, and helping people to suffer less is not a bad thing to do. I'm just sharing what I'm thinking. I'm not saying that that's how you should face Collapse, but we all have, we all have a kind of a common point with Anarchy here in this group. And Anarchy is not just a rejection of hierarchy and power, it's also mutual aid. And the dimension of mutual aid might sound a bit either moralistic or religious, or I don't know.
No, yeah, don't get me wrong. I think,
but,
yeah,
you know,
maybe Bob
it's
was.
a lot. You can't just put that aside and say, well, you know, it's all going to go to shit. The Titanic is sinking, so
I agree.
Let's go and drink champagne, or let's kill everybody, or just watch it and meditate. You know, you're going to be faced with things that are going to be on your front door, especially if you're in England or in a city, but even in the countryside to a certain extent, because that's where people are going to run if they can. If you look at all the stories of famines and catastrophes and the collapse of the Soviet Union, I have a friend, a Russian friend, who explained to me what it was when she was a child on the farm with her parents, and she saw people coming out from the cities to try to find food. And, you know, it does, practical things will happen like that. And there's a lot to think about in those lines, you know, because it's not just what we are comfortably in front of our laptops to watching China collapse and the COVID and the this and the that. It could happen very suddenly,
Yeah, I agree. It's completely, Sophie. It will come to visit you sooner than you think. But I don't. I think maybe. Well, I hope I didn't come across. I think Bob maybe is showing some frustration. I wouldn't. I don't think it's. Yeah, it's definitely not right to sort of sit here in glee at that at all. It's
But it's
terrible because
if
it's
it's
Oh
like
no,
wrong,
yeah,
we're
it's
all
not
brought up in
glee.
this world and it's the
if
way
it's,
things are.
yeah,
But it's yeah, it's definitely about
but you
because
won't anyway. You'd be faced with it anyway, practically. So
Mm,
it's. I mean, I've thought about that sometimes too, going on top of a mountain and just letting everything go. But I mean, it's not going to be possible, and it's not going to happen.
no,
And you
Not
can
on the
write
top of a
wonderful.
mountain, no.
Even when Hugh was on his boat, he knew well what his dream was: is to get a flotilla and have a lot of boats together that are going to help each other. And even if a tsunami happened, well, at least you won't be on your own, you know. And it's that's it. That's what it is. That's what we're doing now. We are not alone. And we are
yeah,
not alone on a tiny scale, but nobody is. You're never alone.
no. I think the thing that scares me most is kind of just the last point I just wanted to make before I'm going to have to shoot. Unfortunately, was just about on that the shocking thing about that state control over our lives is when you look at this situation now and you think, well, people are so reliant and they're so nannied that it does worry me, like that whole managed extinction situation, because I just do worry that people will just willingly do what they're told to the bitter end. And I can see that sort of shocking video that Hugh made about those situations that have been shown in history before. You can just see how easily that can happen. I think that's the most sort of worrying thing.
Almost
So
guaranteed.
yeah, for sure. I think that's and I do completely agree that it's all about, as you say, helping each other in these dark times. So yeah, and with that, I've got to go, unfortunately, but lovely to chat to you all, and see you soon.
Goodbye. Nice talking to you. No, don't get me wrong, Bob. I didn't mean that that was your position, but what I mean is there's an aspect that we don't even realize when things come practically on. You know, we can have an idea about ourselves and about our process, our capacities and our talents and things like that. But it's like that man said in the in the video we talked about at the start. You know, sometimes things happen and you absolutely cannot resist. And I think that's what's going to happen for some people, and hopefully for quite a lot. It's what happened to people when they were in dire situations during holocausts, during genocides, during these things. You know, you suddenly are in something, and you need to get wise, and you need to get your psychological preparation in order, more than anything else. More than anything else, I think. All the rest, you can have your lentils and your chickpeas and your garden and all that. That's okay, but that's not to be discarded. It's not to be discarded at all. I do a lot of things like that. I learn a lot of things, skills and stuff that I didn't know, just because I could show them to somebody, because I won't be probably able to do all that. But it's because I find that there might be people that might know something I don't know, but I can provide something I know. And that's just the way I look at it a little bit. I'm experimenting in all sorts of things, and it's giving a kind of excitement into my life, this sort of thing, because you want to find something that makes you happy every day. If you're going to walk to the gas chamber with your head down, well, you can if you like. That's up to you, but that's not what I want to do.
Yeah, I'm going to get them to shoot me in the head before they walk me to the gas chamber. But that's the only way to go, isn't it? But whether or not, yeah, I think that that's the thing, when we try and talk about psychological or spiritual or whatever internal processes we might go or look into, we always end up talking about something else, and I'm wondering if maybe even that is really an impossible thing to articulate, or maybe it's so difficult to think about and articulate that you know, maybe it's like when, you know, if there is a sort of, I mean, I don't mean in like a massive global sense, but when there's events where the shit hits the fan, so suddenly my neighborhood is flooded, then you find out what the resources are that you have, you know, in not in material sense, but in the non-material. And so maybe there's only so much you can prepare for it. And I suppose if you've had experience like in the medical field, then you have some insight into what your own response is to having to offer people like material help, and also the emotional support that goes with that. But yeah, I'm sorry, I got distracted there again. But maybe you're just winging it always, you know, and maybe that's where you think about Kastrup's or well, it's not his idea, but this idea of natural impulses that will guide us when the time comes, rather than trying to speculate about it.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. The speculation is not really and it's not conductive to personal growth and to improving your knowledge of yourself. It's actually puts you in a box and saying, well, okay, I'm going to be like this and that's it. No, you just be open to whatever can happen. You never know what's coming your way. You never know. You never know.
But I'm still going to attempt to practice Schadenfreude and indifference in the face of catastrophe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's a form of acceptance, which is not necessarily bad, because it can save you a lot of energy,
exactly.
so that you need to eat less then. And talking about that, I think also I'm really a practical person. But I think, and I've said it before in meetings at the time of you again. There's one thing that people overlook an awful lot in terms of we all say we want to survive until it's our time, but you want to work on your what you eat and your physical condition, not because you have to be healthy and you have to meet the this to that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that in preparation of shortages and unavailability of products, you want to realize that we're eating in this part of the world far too much. In general, I'm not going to be moralizing about the American or European diet. I mean, too much, like too much calories, too much everything, and reducing just the quantities a little bit. Not talking about getting right weight, or I'm not talking about these sort of things. I'm thinking of getting used to now and again have a day without food, see how you are, get to know yourself. Watch what you can stick in terms of hunger. It's a very good exercise, and it can be used aside with meditation and all sorts of other things. But we could very easily cut down an awful lot of what we're eating and we could be hungry a little bit, feel hunger, know what it feels like in your body, recognize the signs of hunger, which are often confused with other things that we go for. And for example, boredom or things can bring you to eat when you're not really hungry. Do you know what I mean? So that's number one. And number two is the strength, our body strength, because if the cars go, or if things don't start not working, we're going to need our legs much more. We're going to need our breath. We're going to need to be able to walk to places, to carry heavier things because they won't be delivered and stuff like that. So I often think that being simple is simply preparing is also in everyday life, including a little bit of this. Maybe not spending so much time sitting down, and not spending so much time in a car, or being outside if you can, depending on where you live. But getting getting lean and strong, like the people our ancestors used to be, basically. Because if I look at the pictures and paintings of our forebears, you can see a complete different build in the human being. And the notion of hunger and the notion of a meal now has nothing to do with what we really need and what was needed in the past too. Okay, sorry for the rant. Well, it's not a rant, it's more a reflection I have every day, because I kind of think about, I look around me, I look at people and I see what shape they're in, and I'm thinking, guy, you don't hold a chance if shit hits the fan, you know, and you want to understand cold, pain, hunger, you know, all these things, you know, you want to understand what it is to be to feel pain in your muscles when you're carrying something, to get, you know, this world of softies is not going to hold very long.
Well, yeah, I think I think it's very difficult for people to internalize that in terms of, well, I regularly fast and take cold showers as well. I've started having a crack at the old Wim Hofing. And yeah, it's challenging, isn't it? When you have hot water coming out of the fucking tap, even though we can barely afford it now, it's kind of difficult. So you've got to have a certain perspective to go, right, I'm going to choose to do those things when I don't really have to. And I suppose, well, this is part of the downfall of our humanity, isn't it? That, you know, people are walking past a McDonald's all the time and they don't know, you know, it's very difficult. We're not designed to have any control over that, I guess.
Well, I think you're right somewhere that we're not designed, because I think that we have certain, from hunter-gatherers times, certain propension of binging on carbs if we have access to them. It has been studied with a long time ago by some guy who's saying how some of them could absolutely, I don't know, I think they did that on researchers on bodies, but and on living hunter-gatherers that tend to eat an awful lot of fruit when they find them, even though they don't need them. So we have certainly that in our genes, but that doesn't mean that we don't have also like, I mean, we've talked about meditation many times, where to decide to meditate, you make a conscious decision and effort to go and sit down somewhere and just shut up and just stay quiet and still. Okay, well, it's the same thing when you're going to think, when you're going to decide to look at how you live or how you wash or whatever. You know, let's say, for example, you've been eating by the clock, breakfast, lunch and dinner, and today, well, you know, no, today you don't fill up your fridge and you have to go somewhere to get your food when you need it. And, you know, you do sorts of little things like that. It's not something that's very big. You can do that in a very small way, but just one portion less of pasta, a little bit less of this, a little bit less of that. People are afraid of being hungry. They're afraid of the sensation of hunger, instead of understanding that it is a driving instinct that gives you a certain energy to go and look for your food. But because it's already there in the fridge, or in, like you say, in a McDonald's in front of you, you're not going to have this driving energy to go and look for it. If you see, do you see what I mean?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. It's just not, you know, the way the ancestors lived was you went out and found your food and then stuffed your face. And then the next day there might not have been any food, and that was that. You sort of rolled with the punches, I guess, or whatever.
Well, you see what where that led us.
The convenience. Yeah, exactly. They'd make that lovely sourdough. Yeah, that's.
But as DB is saying, you know, the body is the temple of the mind. If your temple is a horrible mess, the mind will be too. And that's, I totally 100% agree with that. There's no point in trying to do all sorts of nice preparation and, you know, we're going to meditate and we're going to get enlightened and stuff. And you don't look after the basics, which are sleep, food, you know, warmth, and eventually a bit of wash. Well, all that is not going to be bring you anywhere to do all the spiritual stuff if you're not doing that first. I would even go as far as saying there's no point in attempting any spiritual venture of any kind if you haven't put a little bit of order in your house, in your body, because that will, it's just self-defeating.
It's all one thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not two separate things, I don't think. It's just we think, you know, because of the fucking Greeks.
Well, yeah, but a lot of gurus and people in that sort of fashion thing on the internet about, you know, meditation, living, etc., healthy life and all that, they're making it like a, I don't know how to explain that to you, but it's a kind of a, they tell people, they give people diets, and they give people, you know, you're going to do macrobiotic for this, and you're going to go and meditate for an hour. This is all bullshit, because it's not a way of living that they are teaching. They are giving a kind of recipes that are fitting what they're selling, because they have picked up in Asia that they were doing this like that, and they were eating that sort of diet. This doesn't work. This doesn't work. First, if you start with the body first, you cannot go wrong afterwards. You have to start with that. If you don't start there, you'll go nowhere. You'll go nowhere. I've got many examples, and of people around me like that, and it's unfortunate. Maybe I'm talking because I'm an old woman who's a granny and a mother and a woman, so I know more and more, maybe grounded in the body and the food and all these things. But I come from a long line of botanists and gardeners and cooks, and they've always said that to me, and I believe the wise women that have told me that. It is the truth. It is the first thing. It is the first thing. And whatever prepping you're doing, well, a lot of the preppers I'm looking at, they're calculating their intake of food in what they're having now, which is completely crazy. You know, their portions are calculated on the American Army rations. Like, what? You know, the American Army rations are for big guys who are fighting or walking in the jungle. It's ridiculous in terms of calories. It's also ridiculous in terms of quality, and it doesn't make any sense in time of collapse. You want to be diverse. You want to be diverse in what you eat, and you want to be able to adjust to any type of kind of what you have. You have to eat what you have, and not try to have what you want to eat. If you know what I mean. Doing silence. We've talked about food.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, I don't think human beings don't know anything about food anyway. So I think, yeah, it comes back to that. So yeah, I guess, yeah, there's an entity, isn't there? There is an entity here, and it's a body and a mind, and there isn't really a separation between the two. But we've sort of been trained that there is, I think.
Yes.
That's part of the mistake. And yeah, but which leads back into all those gurus and stuff are talking about this non-dual thing. But I suppose, I don't really know about what they're trying to say. But yeah, there isn't any enlightenment. There isn't a state of mind that's different to anything. Yeah, eat your vegetables, I guess, and go for a long walk every day.
But it's not just going for a long walk every day. It's realize that once you walk, once you move, you're warmer. If you're warmer, you need less energy to heat yourself. If you several people in a room, you're much warmer than if you're on your own. All this brings you back to basic common sense, mutual thinking. You know, it's just like we have been trained for generations to live in a way that is absurd. And this way of living has brought us to where we are now. And we're going to be faced now with, you are already in some countries with cold houses and empty shelves and stuff like that. But it's now that you have to do it.
Yeah, I guess that's the only thing that I would be. Yeah, I think it might be if maybe it just happens. Maybe you don't have to do anything.
Well, yeah, but if you don't do anything, it depends where you're starting. You see? What do you mean by not doing anything?
Well, things will unfold as they will, and
But you want to survive.
well, it's not up to me. I don't think. I don't think I have agency in that. I think that
No,
there's
of
going to
course not
be.
to a certain extent, but in a sort of um, in a sort of do you want to be part of the guys who say, well, it's party until we drop and that's it and fuck it, doesn't matter? Or do you think that you want to survive hardship?
Well, I don't have a perspective on that. I mean, I'm not a party person, so I'm definitely not part of that
Yeah.
gang.
No, I know.
So I'm going to, but at the same time, yeah, it comes back to this whole topic of like just really not really having any sense of what the hell's going on, and that the sense of whatever might be going on or not going on is becoming more and more convoluted and I don't know, ephemeral maybe. And so like at some point, like where I am at the moment, I'm watching, say, in America, there's this very extreme weather, or we're used to watching that happening in other countries, like poor countries. We're used to watching, go, oh, that's terrible. Look at those poor drowning Bangladeshis. But at any moment, something could happen here. I'm anticipating, and whether it's something to do with the socio-political makeup of things, or whether it's to do with weather events, or whether it's to do with just like suddenly resources stopping being available. And at that point, I'll find out what my reaction will be. And I'm at a loss to really try and preempt that in any way. So I suppose I'm following, I've got this impulse to do meditation. I don't know why. That's I suppose what connects me to the narrative Bernardo Kastrup was talking about, because I'm doing various things, walking, meditating, fasting, and I don't really know why, but they feel like they are things to do. And when you talk about the idea of experiencing discomfort or whatever that we're not used to, then that sort of rationalizes maybe some of those impulses, but ultimately those impulses are coming from somewhere I can't entirely explain until, as in you've offered some wisdom about that in a way that post-rationalizes some things that I relate to. But that's it. At the end of the day, I've got no fucking idea what's going on, and I've got no fucking idea what I'm going to do. And so, if an actual event occurs, because there's those two collapse ideas that we talk about, which is the sort of like slow grinding down. There's like the John Michael Greer collapse, where it kind of happens in this gradual way, and there's all these little bumpy events, and slowly you realize that you're a medieval peasant. Or there's the collapse of the like dramatic catastrophe, and maybe in different parts of the world there will be catastrophes, and that might happen where I am, or it might be that sort of grinding collapse that suddenly you realize that there's only one product available to buy for eating in the shops, but you're not actually being genocided as such. And so depending on which one of those things materializes, then I suppose we will individually find out what we're made of, isn't it? So
yeah, but if you integrate collapse into your daily life now, whether it's sudden or gradual, you swallow the pill easier. Like, if you, I'm not advocating going to live in a plastic bag in the mud. What I'm saying is just watching every day. Well, it's not a rational thing. Also, sometimes, as you said, it happens. You don't know why. You suddenly just realize that you don't need that, or that you don't want to do that. You don't know why, and it just happens, and it can give you satisfaction or not satisfaction. You don't know. It depends how your body feels. You will get the sensations one way or another. Like what you're saying for meditation. If you meditate, you don't know why, but you're doing it. Okay, well, I do other things in my life that I just. Sometimes I started them very young, and I didn't know why I was doing them. Why I was spending so much time outside. Why I like to walk in the rain, and I don't know, but I do it, and it's something that's coming to me like that. And what I'm saying, that I want people to realize that they're not ready. A lot of them, it's because I've worked in the health profession, and I've seen the state of decay of the human species in terms of resilience to cold and effort and physical exercise that has been, you see, people have been sold an idea of fitness through commercials of for gyms and muscles, and this is not the thing, you know, this is not the thing at all. The thing is not, it's not that, it's a totally different thing. It's a progressive way of living that makes you fit at 80 or 100-year old. If you, I've known people who have lived in nature, or outside in places that are not very friendly, like where I am in Ireland, and who have lived an extremely hard life, but have had a very happy life, but also very fit and not sick when they get old. And those people manage to fare through deaths and horrors and things around them in a much more easy way, and they could help other people much better because they were there for them. And we're going to be in a society where it's not going to be very gentle for the weak and the sick. Don't forget that. I often think of what Derek Jensen was saying, because he's depending on the pharmaceutical to keep him in good shape, because he's got a condition where he depends on medications. And he knows well that when shit hits the fan, he's going to be fucked. And he knows it. And I that's why I'm advocating a kind of care of your body, really, really as a number one. Because it's your best ally, it's your best friend. It can be your best weapon, also. It's also your temple, as DB says. Everything is connected. That's why I'm saying that. I'm not saying that we all have to go and, you know, carry weights and start to look like Schwarzenegger or something like that. I'm not saying that. I'm saying
that's a relief.
But I'm saying that in everyday life, there's plenty of ways of getting out of your little, that you can detect them. We all have different things. We know that. We know that, you know.
Yeah, I think. I just think it's going to be. We'll see. Yeah, I was going to say I'm stoic, but I don't think I'm stoic. But if I was going to prepare myself, it would be to be best suited to see how things unfold. And I've sort of, yeah, that's it really.
Yeah, but you can only be but very humble and do what you can yourself, and then your little thing, you know, you're not going to be able to give rules and ways to go through this.
Oh, absolutely not.
What I'm sharing is just what I've discovered myself through the years, and because I'm an older person, so I kind of have been different ways, and I follow different things. So I know now that my instinct is right, and I know that I'm putting that number one in my life, and it's become a second nature. And yeah, it is so far.
Yeah. Right, I'm very afraid I have to bugger off.
Yeah, well, I mean, me too. I've got things to do now. I'm going to be. It's been a while now. We've been nearly 2 hours on this. Sorry, I took the end of the meeting off the Bernardo Kastrup and the collapse. The thing.
No, thank God you did. Bloody
I
hell.
just got. I would like to be able to share that more, but sometimes I'm not as well spoken as you guys in English, so maybe I'm not expressing myself exactly like I'd like to. But yeah, we can talk about that again.
No,
Thank you
I don't
very
agree
much for
with that at all.
Are you going to do the thing?
Shall we sew it up? Let's wrap it up. We're going to wrap it up now by, if we have even any idea what this conversation has been about, we're going to let it all go, because we don't want to cling to our thoughts and feelings. We don't want to cling to our ideas. We want to be flexible. We want to be able to, I guess, float like a leaf in the wind, or be like little jellyfish squiggling around in the ocean, being swept by currents, and maybe sometimes finding our own way, and sometimes letting the swell push us this way or that. I don't know. The key thing is I don't know. So anybody who listens to anything I say also doesn't know anything. If you're listening to me, if we're listening to ourselves, we don't know anything. The theme of tonight's meeting, for me anyway, is that we don't know anything. I don't know anything. And that's why we should forget all about it. So we don't have to be feeling bad about how little we know. On that bombshell, let's enjoy a moment of silence to let go.
Thank you.
Yep, cheers everyone. See you later.
Goodbye.